She gave birth to 5 children for an infertile CEO, never expecting to see them again. But 10 years later, when a little girl walks into her life, with her same eyes, everything changes. What was supposed to be a buried secret becomes a miracle no one can explain. The man who thought he could never have a family suddenly discovers the truth. 5 children, all his, all hers, and all lost because of one terrible lie. Now the world's watching as these 2 broken souls fight to rebuild what was stolen from them. But behind the headlines and tears lies a darker secret. Someone powerful doesn't want the truth to come out. Can love, faith, and forgiveness overcome the lies that tore them apart? Or will the truth destroy the only family they've ever wanted? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The morning light filtered weakly through the cloud cover, casting muted shadows across Amara Carter's desk at Oak Ridge Elementary. She adjusted the small potted peace lily on her desk, a touch of life in her cozy office where countless children had shared their hopes and worries over the years. The walls, painted a soft sage green, displayed colorful artwork from students, their dreams and fears expressed in crayon and marker. Amara's fingers traced the rim of her coffee mug, still warm from her morning brew. The familiar scent of coffee and pencil shavings filled the air, grounding her in the present moment. But her mind kept drifting back to earlier that morning, to a pair of eyes that mirrored her own, Grace Vale. The name echoed in her thoughts, stirring memories she'd carefully tucked away years ago. The girl had walked into her office with such confidence, her backpack covered in cartoon butterflies bouncing slightly with each step. There was something so familiar about the way she tilted her head, the way her smile lit up her entire face. "My dad's Rivervale," Grace had said proudly during their session, swinging her legs as she sat in the oversized chair across from Amara's desk. "He runs this big company in Dallas. Mom died when I was born, but Dad says she was beautiful." Those words had sent a chill down Amara's spine, her hand freezing mid-note on her counselor's pad. Rivervale. A name from her past, from a time when medical bills had piled up after her husband's accident, when desperation had led her to make a choice that still haunted her dreams. Now, as evening settled over her small ranch-style house on the outskirts of town, Amara sat at her kitchen table. The overhead light cast a warm glow over the worn wood surface, where a manila envelope lay before her. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for it. The kitchen clock ticked steadily in the background, marking time as she carefully extracted the papers inside. The contract was still crisp, despite being 10 years old. Legal language filled. The pages, but certain phrases jumped out at her. Surrogate agreement, relinquishment of parental rights, compensation terms. Amara's throat tightened as she remembered signing these papers, remembered thinking it was just a business arrangement. She'd been a surrogate for Rivervale and his wife, Catherine. The procedure had been successful, but then communication suddenly stopped. Her calls went unanswered. The agency told her there had been complications, that the baby hadn't survived. She'd grieved for that loss, added it to the weight she carried after losing her husband. But now, could it be possible? Grace's age matched. Her features. Those were Amara's eyes looking back at her. That was Amara's smile lighting up her face. She spread the papers across the table, scanning dates and details she'd memorized long ago. Her coffee grew cold beside her, untouched. Outside, a car drove past, its headlights briefly illuminating the walls of her modest kitchen with its cheerful yellow paint and collection of copper pots hanging above the stove. Amara's chest felt tight as she remembered Grace's words about her mother dying. What had happened to Catherine Vale? The questions multiplied in her mind, each one leading to another, creating a web of uncertainty and possibility that made her head spin. She picked up her phone, opened her laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard. It would be so easy to search for River Vale, to look up news articles about his company, to try to piece together what had happened all those years ago. But something held her back. The weight of professional ethics, the fear of disrupting a child's life, the uncertainty of what she might discover, it all pressed down on her shoulders. The contract's final page bore 3 signatures, hers, River's, and Catherine's. Amara traced her own name with a fingertip, remembering the woman she'd been then, desperate, grieving, trying to find a way forward after losing her husband. She'd thought being a surrogate would help another family while solving her own problems. She never imagined she might one day find herself face to face with the child she'd carried. Standing up, Amara walked to her kitchen window. The night had settled in fully now, and she could see her reflection in the glass. The same eyes that had looked back at her this morning from a younger face. Her hand pressed against her stomach, remembering the feeling of carrying that child, the whispered prayers and songs she'd shared during those months. Back at the table, she carefully returned the papers to their envelope. The clock showed 9:30 in the evening, but sleep felt impossible. Her mind raced with memories, the fertility clinic's sterile rooms, the legal meetings, the lonely months of pregnancy, the silence that followed. And now Grace, bright, beautiful Grace, sitting in her office, talking about her father, the CEO, and the mother she never knew. Amara's hand shook as she sealed the envelope. Whatever the truth was, she knew one thing for certain. Her life had changed the moment Grace Vale walked into her office. The past she'd tried so hard to leave behind had found its way back to her, wrapped in a package of butterfly stickers and curious questions. The quiet of her house pressed in around her as she sat there, the contract now locked away again in its drawer. Tomorrow she would see Grace again. Tomorrow she would look into those familiar eyes and carry the weight of this knowledge. Tomorrow she would have to decide what to do with the sudden upheaval of her carefully ordered world. But for now, in the stillness of her kitchen, Amara Carter sat with her memories and her questions, while somewhere across town, a little girl who shared her smile slept peacefully, unaware of the bonds that might connect them. The clock ticked steadily on, marking time as Amara's world shifted on its axis, rearranging itself around this new reality. Amara sat in her parked car outside Oak Ridge Elementary, watching parents drop off their children. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, her mind racing with thoughts of Grace. She hadn't slept well, the weight of yesterday's discovery pressing heavily on her chest. "I can't just sit here," she whispered to herself. Making a quick decision, she called the school office. "This is Amara Carter. I'm not feeling well today. I need to take a personal day." 20 minutes later, she pulled up to the address she remembered so clearly. 1234 Medical Plaza Drive. The modern building where she'd undergone the surrogacy procedures now stood empty, its windows dark and dusty. Yellow tape marked with "No Trespassing" crisscrossed the entrance. Amara's heart sank as she stared at the abandoned clinic. Paint peeled from the walls, and weeds pushed through cracks in the concrete steps. A far cry from the pristine facility she remembered from 10 years ago. She noticed movement in the building next door, a dental office that had been there even back then. Taking a deep breath, she straightened her navy blazer and walked toward it. The bell chimed softly as she pushed open the door. An older woman with silver-streaked hair looked up from the reception desk. Her name tag read, "Martha." "Can I help you?" Martha asked, adjusting her reading glasses. "I hope so," Amara said, forcing a smile. "I'm looking for information about the fertility clinic that used to be next door. Southwest Fertility Associates?" Martha's expression changed immediately, her friendly smile fading. "Oh, that place. Closed down years ago. Such a mess. A mess? Amara's voice wavered slightly. What kind of mess? Martha glanced around as if checking for eavesdroppers, though they were alone in the reception area. There was some kind of scandal, big investigation. The FBI came and everything. She lowered her voice. Something about falsified records and consent forms. Never did get the whole story, but it was in all the papers at the time. Amara's legs felt weak. She steadied herself against the counter. Do you know what happened to the records? The patient files? Seized by the authorities, I expect. Martha shook her head. Such a shame. Dr. Marshall just disappeared one day. Left the country, from what I heard. Amara thanked Martha and walked back to her car on shaky legs. Once inside, she let out a long, unsteady breath. 5 embryos. She remembered that detail clearly. They had implanted 5 embryos to increase the chances of success. The clinic had told her none had survived. But Grace was living proof that was a lie. Back home, Amara paced her living room, unable to settle. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across her hardwood floors as she tried to make sense of it all. Her laptop sat open on the coffee table, and finally she sat down and typed Rivervale CEU into the search bar. Links appeared immediately. Rivervale was apparently a prominent figure in the tech industry. She clicked on a recent article from the Dallas Business Journal. Tech CEO turned philanthropist still mourns late wife. The photo showed a tall man with salt and pepper hair and deep-set eyes that held a familiar sadness. He stood in front of a charitable foundation's logo, but his smile didn't reach those grief-shadowed eyes. Amara recognized that look. She'd seen it in her own mirror after losing her husband. The article mentioned that Catherine Vale had passed away during childbirth complications 10 years ago. River had since thrown himself into philanthropic work, establishing the Vale Foundation to support children's causes. Something about the timeline nagged at Amara's mind. 10 years ago. That matched perfectly with her surrogacy. Her eyes fell on the Contact Us link at the bottom of the Vale Foundation's webpage. Before she could second-guess herself, she clicked it and began typing. Dear Mr. Vale, my name is Amara Carter. 10 years ago, I was a surrogate mother through Southwest Fertility Associates. I believe we need to talk. Sincerely, Amara Carter. Her finger hovered over the send button for a long moment before she finally pressed it. The message disappeared into cyberspace, and Amara sat back, her heart pounding. What had she just done? She tried to distract herself with household chores, folding laundry, organizing her pantry, anything to keep her hands busy and her mind from spinning with possibilities. But every few minutes she found herself checking her email. Hours passed, the sun set, casting her living room in shadows. Amara had just decided to give up and go to bed when her laptop chimed. A new email appeared in her inbox. Ms. Carter, I will meet with you tomorrow at 2 o'clock at the Vale Foundation offices, 3500 Maple Avenue, Suite 400, Dallas. Regards, R. Vale. Amara read the message 3 times, her hands trembling. The reply was terse, businesslike, but it was an answer. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock, she would finally face River Vale and perhaps learn the truth about what happened 10 years ago. She thought about Grace, about those familiar eyes and that bright smile. She thought about the 5 embryos, about the years of thinking they hadn't survived. She thought about Catherine Vale, who had supposedly died in childbirth. None of it added up, but tomorrow she might finally get some answers. Setting her alarm for the next morning, Amara tried to prepare herself for whatever revelations awaited her. Sleep would not come easily tonight, but tomorrow would bring answers, or perhaps more questions. Either way, there was no turning back now. Amara's hands gripped the steering wheel as she navigated through downtown Dallas. The Vale Foundation headquarters rose before her, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that seemed to touch the clouds. Her small-town sensibilities felt out of place among the urban sophistication, but she straightened her shoulders and reminded herself why she was here. The elevator whispered as it carried her to the 40th floor. Her reflection in the polished doors showed a woman trying her best to look composed. Navy blazer neat, natural curls carefully arranged, hands clasped to hide their trembling. The doors opened to reveal an expansive reception area decorated in muted greys and blues. A young receptionist greeted her with practiced efficiency. "Miss Carter, Mr. Vale will see you now." Amara followed her through glass doors into a corner office that commanded a stunning view of the Dallas skyline. River Vale stood at the window, his back to the door. Even from behind, she could see the tension in his shoulders beneath his perfectly tailored suit. When he turned, Amara's breath caught. The man from the photo was both exactly as she expected and completely different. His salt and pepper hair was expertly styled, but dark circles shadowed his eyes. He carried himself with the authority of a CEO, yet something in his bearing spoke of exhaustion, of years spent carrying a heavy burden. "Miss Carter," he said, extending his hand. "Please, have a seat." The moment their eyes met, she saw recognition flash across his face. His complexion went ashen, and he gripped the edge of his desk to steady himself. "You're her," he whispered. "The surrogate." Amara nodded, lowering herself into one of the leather chairs facing his desk. "Yes, Mr. Vale, though it seems there's much more to that story than either of us knew." River sank into his chair, running a hand through his hair, a gesture that disrupted its careful styling and revealed the man beneath the polished exterior. "The surrogacy program, they told me the embryos failed, all of them. And then Catherine—" His voice cracked on his late wife's name. "They said there were complications. She died at the hospital." "Mr. Vale," Amara said gently, opening her bag to remove a worn manila folder. "I need to tell you about one of my students. Her name is Grace Vale." River's head snapped up at the name. "She's 10 years old," Amara continued, her voice soft but steady. "She has your chin, Mr. Vale. But her eyes—" She touched the corner of her own eye. "They're shaped just like mine." The color drained further from River's face. He pressed his fingers to his temples, as if trying to ward off a sudden headache. "Grace, she's adopted. Catherine arranged it through a private agency before she—" He trailed off, his eyes growing distant with memory. "When was Grace born?" Amara asked, though she already knew the answer. 10 years ago, April 15th. Amara pulled out her documentation from the surrogacy program. "The same day I gave birth to 5 healthy babies at Southwest Fertility Associates." River stared at her papers, then yanked open his desk drawer to retrieve a thick file. His hand shook as he spread the documents across his desk. Birth certificates, adoption papers, medical records, all bearing dates from 10 years ago. Hours passed as they pieced together the puzzle. The afternoon sun tracked across the sky outside River's window as they compared documents, shared memories, and uncovered a truth neither had imagined. Catherine was desperate for children, River said quietly, studying a document with his wife's signature. When the first rounds of IVF failed, she became obsessed. She handled all the paperwork with the clinic. I was so busy with the company's expansion. His voice was heavy with regret. I should have paid more attention. Amara leaned forward to examine a form he'd just pulled from the file. This consent form, that's not my signature. I never signed this. River rubbed his eyes. There's more. These bank transfers. He pulled up his computer records. Large payments to offshore accounts, all authorized by Catherine. The dates align with the surrogacy program and Grace's adoption. She must have arranged it all. Amara said, the realization dawning. Paid off the clinic to tell you the embryos failed, tell me they didn't survive, then used private adoption agencies to place the babies. And somewhere out there. River's voice was barely above a whisper. 4 more children. Amara finished. Our children. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. River stood abruptly and walked to the window, his silhouette dark against the setting sun. All these years, he said, I've been living with only half the truth. Catherine's death, Grace's adoption, it was all built on lies. Amara gathered her papers with trembling hands. The magnitude of what they'd discovered was overwhelming. 5 children, not lost, but hidden. Living somewhere, perhaps wondering about their origins, maybe even looking for answers themselves. I should go, she said softly, rising from her chair. It's getting late. River turned from the window, his face etched with the same stunned disbelief she felt. Ms. Carter, Amara. He seemed to struggle for words. What do we do with this information? She paused at the door, her hand on the handle. I don't know, she answered honestly. But Grace is in my school now. She's real. And somewhere out there. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The weight of their shared discovery filled the space between them. 5 living children, born of her body, carrying their combined genetics, scattered to unknown corners of the world through Catherine Vale's desperate deception. The door clicked shut behind her with a quiet finality. As Amara rode the elevator down to the lobby, her mind spun with the implications of everything they'd learned. The truth had been buried in legal papers and forged documents for a decade, but now it was free. And like all buried things finally brought to light, it would demand to be acknowledged. Sleep eluded Amara that night. By 5 in the morning, she'd made her decision. She called the school's automated system to request a substitute, then packed her laptop and the manila folder of documents into her bag. The drive to Dallas felt both longer and shorter than the day before, her mind racing with possibilities and prayers. Lord, she whispered as she navigated through morning traffic. If this is your plan, please light the way. River was already waiting in the lobby of his building when she arrived. Dark circles under his eyes suggesting he'd had as restless a night as she had. He held up his phone. I called my corporate attorney, but she specializes in business law. She recommended someone else, Marissa Green. She's young, but she has experience with family law and adoption cases. Attorney Green's office was in a modest building downtown, worlds away from the gleaming tower of Vale Industries. The lawyer who greeted them was barely in her 30s, with bright eyes and a determined set to her jaw. Mr. Vale, Ms. Carter, she said, gesturing to the chairs in front of her desk. I reviewed the preliminary documents you sent over this morning. This is quite a situation. Amara placed her folder on the desk. We need to access records from Southwest Fertility Associates. The clinic closed 8 years ago. And we need to know what happened to 4 infants born there. River added, his voice tight with controlled emotion. Marissa nodded, already typing on her computer. Medical records don't vanish when clinics close. They're required by law to transfer them to state storage facilities. She paused, frowning at her screen. But there's something odd here. The clinic's closure wasn't routine. There are sealed court documents. River leaned forward. Can you unseal them? With the right petition, yes, but... Marissa's fingers flew across the keyboard. Sometimes the fastest way isn't through official channels. Let me make a call. She stepped out of the office, leaving Amara and River in tense silence. Amara found herself studying his profile, the sharp line of his jaw, the slight furrow between his brows that matched the one she'd noticed on Grace. Marissa returned 15 minutes later with a spark of triumph in her eyes. "I have an address. There's a former nurse from the clinic living in Arlington. She left just before everything fell apart." The drive to Arlington took 45 minutes. The nurse's house was a small ranch-style home with carefully tended flower beds. A woman in her 60s answered the door, her face falling when she saw them. "Sarah Jenkins?" Marissa asked. "I'm Attorney Green. This is Rivervale and Amara Carter. We need to talk about Southwest Fertility Associates." The woman's hands trembled as she led them to her living room. "I knew this day would come," she said quietly. "I've prayed about it for years." Amara sat forward. "You remember us?" Sarah nodded. "How could I forget? 5 healthy babies, all perfect. Then Mrs. Vale died during recovery and everything." She pressed her lips together. Dr. Matthews panicked. There were irregularities in the paperwork, things Mrs. Vale had arranged. He was afraid of lawsuits, of losing his license. "What happened to the babies?" River's voice was hoarse. "They were placed in the foster system," Sarah said, quietly, through different counties to avoid questions. "I tried to stop it, but—" She wrung her hands. "That's why I quit. I couldn't be part of the cover-up." "And Grace?" Amara asked. "How did she end up with River?" "That was Catherine's doing," Sarah explained. "Before she died, she'd arranged adoptions through private agencies. One of them went through, Grace. The others fell through when she passed." River stood abruptly and walked to the window, his shoulders rigid. Amara could see the tension radiating through his frame. "We'll need everything you remember," Marissa said gently. "Names, dates, counties, anything that could help us trace the children." Sarah nodded. "I kept records, not official ones, but—" She disappeared into another room and returned with a worn notebook. "I couldn't just forget them." The rest of the day passed in a blur of database searches and phone calls. They relocated to River's office, where multiple computers could access different state systems simultaneously. Marissa worked her legal connections while River leveraged his business network. Amara found herself poring over Sarah's notebook, memorizing details about 5 tiny babies she'd carried but never held. Evening faded into night. Office lights clicked off in neighboring buildings, but they kept working. Pizza boxes and coffee cups accumulated on River's desk. Around midnight, Amara caught River watching her as she rubbed her tired eyes. "You don't have to stay," he said softly. "This isn't your responsibility." Amara met his gaze steadily. "Yes, it is. These children, I carried them. I felt them move. I sang to them." Her voice cracked slightly. "I thought they were gone, but they've been out there all this time. God brought Grace to my school for a reason. This is my calling as much as it is yours." River nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. They returned to their searches, working in comfortable silence broken only by keyboard clicks and occasional murmurs of consultation. The sky was beginning to lighten, painting the Dallas skyline in shades of pearl and gold, when River finally spoke again. His voice was barely above a whisper, but in the pre-dawn quiet, it carried clearly. "If they're alive—" He paused, emotion making his voice rough. "They deserve to know who we are." Amara looked up from her screen, seeing in his face the same mix of fear and determination she felt in her heart. The search ahead would be long and difficult, but they would face it together, guided by faith and the unshakable certainty that somewhere out there, 4 more children were waiting to be found. The search consumed their days. River's office became command central, with maps pinned to walls and folders spread across every surface. His business connections proved invaluable, reaching into county systems, cross-referencing dates and locations from Sarah's notebook. On day 4, Marissa burst through the door, waving a stack of papers. "We found them," she announced breathlessly. "All 4. Amara's heart stopped. River stood so quickly his chair rolled backward. "They're all in Texas," Marissa continued. "Different cities, different foster homes. Isaiah in Fort Worth, Lily in Austin, twins Michael and Samuel separated between Houston and San Antonio." "We need to go," Amara said immediately, standing up. "Not just paperwork. We need to see them." River nodded, already reaching for his phone. "I'll have the jet ready in an hour." Fort Worth came first. The shelter was a weathered brick building with cheerful murals that couldn't quite hide its institutional nature. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed overhead as they waited in a small office. Amara's hands trembled in her lap. The door opened, and Isaiah walked in. At 15, he was tall and lanky, with River's sharp jawline and Amara's warm brown eyes. He wore a faded band t-shirt and crossed his arms defensively as he sat. "So," he said flatly, "you're supposed to be my parents?" River started to speak, but Amara touched his arm gently. "We're the people who've been looking for you," she said softly. "I carried you for 9 months, sang to you every night, and lost you before I could hold you. Not a day has gone by that I haven't wondered about you." Isaiah's stance softened slightly. "You're the surrogate?" "Yes. And River, he's your biological father. He didn't know about you either, not until recently." "Why now?" Isaiah's voice cracked slightly. "Why look for us after 15 years? River leaned forward. "Because we just found out you existed. Your sister Grace. She showed up at Amara's school. That's how we discovered the truth about what happened." They talked for hours. Isaiah gradually uncurled from his defensive posture, asking questions about his siblings, about River's company, about Amara's work as a counselor. When they finally had to leave, he hesitated. Will you come back?" "As often as you want," Amara promised. "We're filing adoption papers tomorrow." Austin was next. Lily's foster home was a small duplex with plastic toys scattered across the yard. The 8-year-old who greeted them had Amara's curls and River's quiet intensity. She studied them solemnly for exactly 30 seconds before walking straight to Amara and wrapping her arms around her waist. Amara's breath caught as she held the little girl close. River watched them, his eyes suspiciously bright. "I drew you," Lily said matter-of-factly, pulling back to dig in her pocket. She produced a folded paper with 2 figures drawn in crayon, a tall man and a woman with curly hair. "I didn't know what you looked like, but I drew you anyway." River knelt beside them. "May I see?" Lily handed him the drawing, then reached for his hand. "Are you really going to take us home?" "Yes," River said firmly. "All of you." The twins were harder. Michael and Samuel had been separated for 2 years, and the pain of it showed. Michael, in Houston, was withdrawn and angry. Samuel in San Antonio burst into tears the moment he saw them. "I want my brother." The 7-year-old sobbed into Amara's shoulder. "Please, can I see my brother?" "Soon, sweetheart," Amara promised, her own tears falling freely. "Very soon." River made calls from the car, his voice tight with controlled fury as he spoke to social workers and judges. "These children never should have been separated," he said after hanging up. "I'll make this right." They filed adoption petitions in all 4 cities. River's legal team worked around the clock, pushing through paperwork and expediting processes. Amara took leave from her job, spending every day visiting the children, building trust, creating connections. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. Someone at the courthouse leaked the petitions to a local reporter, and by noon it was national news. Headlines screamed across every platform. "Tech CEO finds 5 miracle children," Lost surrogate babies reunited with biological father? Medical scandal leads to miraculous family reunion. Reporters camped outside River's office and Amara's small house. Their phones rang constantly. Grace was overwhelmed by sudden attention at school. We need to protect them, River said that evening, pacing his office. The media circus will only make the transition harder. Amara nodded, watching him move. They need stability, consistency. She hesitated, then added, they need both of us. River stopped pacing. Move in, he said suddenly. To help with the transition, the guest house is fully furnished, and the children, they respond to you in a way they don't with me. That night, Amara stood on River's porch, a suitcase at her feet. The guest house lights glowed welcomingly across the manicured lawn. Above, stars sparkled in the vast Texas sky. Lord, she whispered, her heart full of hope and trepidation, help us make this a home. She lifted her suitcase and walked toward her new beginning, toward 5 children who needed healing, toward a future she never could have imagined. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but with faith and love, they would find their way together. The guest house door opened easily under her hand, as if welcoming her home. Inside, fresh flowers sat on the kitchen counter, River's thoughtful touch. Amara set down her suitcase and took a deep breath, ready to begin this new chapter of their extraordinary journey. The Vale Mansion transformed overnight from a quiet sanctuary into a whirlwind of activity. Where silence once echoed through marble halls, children's laughter now bounced off every surface. The change started the very morning after Amara moved into the guest wing, when the sound of small feet thundering down hallways replaced the usual stillness of dawn. Amara stood in the main kitchen, tying an apron around her waist as she surveyed the chaos before her. Grace sat at the island counter, carefully pouring milk into her cereal. Lily, still in purple pajamas, was attempting to reach the top cabinet where River stored the pancake mix. Samuel and Michael, the twins, chased each other around the kitchen table, their excited shrieks filling the air. "Careful!" Amara called out, catching a glass before it toppled. "Michael, Samuel, walking feet in the kitchen, please." River appeared in the doorway, his usual crisp suit slightly rumpled, tie askew. He held Isaiah's backpack in one hand and a stack of permission slips in the other. "Does anyone know where the second drawer by the fridge?" Amara answered before he could finish, already pulling out a pen. "And Grace's violin practice is at 4 today, not 3. River's grateful smile made her heart skip. "What would we do without you?" "Starve, probably," Isaiah muttered, grabbing an apple from the fruit bowl. At 15, he maintained a careful distance, but Amara noticed how his eyes followed her movements, seeking reassurance in small ways. "Nobody's starving on my watch," Amara declared, flipping pancakes with practiced ease. "Isaiah, would you help set the table? Grace, honey, could you get your sister some milk?" The kitchen danced with morning chaos, spilled juice, forgotten homework, missing shoes. River attempted to maintain order while answering emails on his phone, his CEO efficiency somewhat overwhelmed by domestic reality. "Dad," Lily called out, tugging his sleeve, "you promised to sign my art project." "Just a moment, sweetheart," River mumbled, typing frantically. Amara gently took his phone. "Go sign her project. I'll handle this email." Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and River's eyes met hers with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper that made her quickly look away. As days turned into weeks, routines began to form. Mornings meant organized chaos, afternoons were filled with homework help and activities, and evenings brought the sweet challenge of bedtime rituals. "Time for prayers," Amara would call out each night, and the children would gather in the main living room. Even Isaiah, who initially claimed he was too old for such things, would quietly join them. One evening, as they sat in a circle, Samuel spontaneously reached for Amara's hand. "Can I pray tonight, Mum?" The word hung in the air like a delicate soap bubble. Amara's breath caught, and she felt River stiffen beside her. "Of course, sweetheart." She managed, squeezing his small hand while trying to ignore the ache in her chest. After that, Mom seemed to spread like wildfire among the children. It slipped out naturally, unconsciously, as if their hearts recognized what their minds didn't yet understand. River would gently remind them, "Amara is helping us for now, children. Remember that." But the corrections grew softer, less frequent, as if he too realized the futility of fighting what was naturally evolving. The days fell into a rhythm. Amara learned each child's quirks and needs, how Grace needed quiet time after school to decompress, how Michael wouldn't eat unless his food didn't touch, how Lily hummed when she was happy. She noticed River's subtle changes too, the way his shoulders relaxed when he came home, how his laugh grew easier, the tender way he tucked the twins in at night. One particularly chaotic evening, after breaking up a squabble between the twins and helping Grace with her science project, Amara found River in his study, head in his hands. "They deserve better than this," he muttered as she approached. "I'm fumbling through fatherhood like a blind man in a maze." Amara perched on his desk, her hand hovering near his shoulder. "You're doing beautifully, River. They don't need perfect. They need present." He looked up at her, eyes tired but warm. "How do you always know exactly what to say?" "Years of counseling practice," she teased, but her smile faded as their eyes held. The air between them felt charged, heavy with unspoken words. Late one night, unable to sleep, Amara padded down the hallway for a glass of water. Soft words from River's study caught her attention. The door stood slightly ajar, spilling warm lamplight into the dark corridor. "Lord." River's voice was raw, vulnerable in a way she'd never heard before. "I know I don't deserve this second chance. The years I wasted in anger and grief, the pain I caused through my ignorance." Amara pressed herself against the wall, heart thundering in her chest. "Please give me strength to keep this family together. Help me be the father these children deserve. And Lord, about Amara." She held her breath, torn between fleeing and staying. "Thank you for sending her to us. I don't have the right to ask for more, but she makes this house feel like home. She makes me want to be better, to be worthy of the grace you've shown us." Tears slid silently down Amara's cheeks as she listened to River pour out his heart. The man who once represented all her pain and loss now knelt in prayer, humble and broken and beautiful in his vulnerability. Standing there in the darkened hallway, Amara faced a truth she'd been trying to deny. She was falling in love with River Vale. Not the polished CEO who'd hired her as a surrogate 15 years ago, but this new River, the devoted father who read bedtime stories in funny voices, who carried band-aids in his pocket for scraped knees, who prayed in the dark for strength to love his children well. The realization terrified her. She was supposed to be helping temporarily, maintaining professional distance. Instead, her heart had quietly built a home in this chaos, in this beautiful mess of a family that wasn't quite hers. Amara crept back to her room in the guest wing, her untouched glass of water forgotten. Sleep eluded her as she lay in bed, River's prayers echoing in her mind, while somewhere in the mansion, 5 children slept peacefully, unaware of the growing love story unfolding beneath their roof. The weeks flowed together like watercolors on paper, each day bleeding into the next in a beautiful mess of activity. River's mansion, once echoing with emptiness, now burst with the sounds of life from sunrise to sunset. River mastered the art of multitasking in ways his business career had never prepared him for. He paced the kitchen during conference calls, one hand holding his phone while the other packed lunchboxes. "Yes, we'll review the quarterly projections," he'd say, then cover the mouthpiece to whisper, "Samuel, don't forget your homework folder." The morning routine became a carefully orchestrated dance. River would drive the older kids to school while joining virtual meetings from his car. He learned to mute his microphone during the chaos of drop-offs, unmuting just in time to contribute to discussions about market strategies. Amara brought warmth to the house in countless ways. She transformed the unused garden into a family project, teaching the children how to dig their hands into rich soil and plant seeds of hope. "See how strong these little seeds are?" she'd say, showing them tiny sprouts pushing through the earth. "That's what you all are, strong and growing every day." The kitchen became the heart of their home. Amara taught them basic cooking skills, turning everyday meals into lessons about measurement, patience, and teamwork. Even Isaiah, usually reserved, would roll up his sleeves to help knead bread dough. "This is how my grandmother taught me," Amara explained one afternoon, guiding Grace's hands through the motions. "She said bread is like love. It needs time, warmth, and gentle hands to grow." Their family dinners became sacred time. River instituted a strict no phones policy, and they gathered each evening to share their days. Laughter flowed easily around the table, though careful observers might notice the underlying currents of uncertainty. Each child carried their wounds differently. Grace's nightmares came like clockwork, usually around 3 in the morning. She'd wake up crying, convinced she was alone again. Amara would find her curled up in her window seat, staring at the stars. "What if they take us away?" Grace whispered one night, her small hand clutching Amara's. "What if this isn't real?" Amara held her close, fighting back her own fears. "I'm right here, sweetheart. Right here." Isaiah's pain showed in his stubborn refusal to settle in. His duffel bag remained packed, sitting by his bedroom door like a silent guardian. When River suggested hanging pictures in his room, Isaiah shrugged. "No point," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Foster homes never last." The words cut deep into both adults' hearts. River spent that evening in his workshop, building Isaiah a bookshelf, as if he could anchor the boy with solid wood and careful craftsmanship. Lily collected small objects, rocks, buttons, paper clips, hiding them in her pockets like talismans against change. Michael developed a strict routine around meals, refusing to eat if his food touched or his plate was the wrong color. Samuel shadowed Amara constantly, as if afraid she might disappear when he wasn't looking. One evening, after the children were finally asleep, Amara found River in his office. Papers covered his desk, and he sat surrounded by unopened envelopes, their yellowed edges speaking of years past. The return address made her heart skip. New Life Fertility Clinic. "I found these in Catherine's old files," River said quietly, not looking up. "I've been trying to find the courage to open them." Amara sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. "We should know the truth, River. All of it." He nodded, picking up one envelope. The paper crackled as he broke the seal, sounding impossibly loud in the quiet room. His eyes scanned the contents, and Amara watched the color drain from his face. "What is it?" she whispered. River's voice was hoarse as he read aloud. "Final notice. This letter serves as formal warning that the surrogacy arrangement between Mrs. Catherine Vale and surrogate Amara Carter was not properly authorized. No valid consent forms were filed. This constitutes a breach of medical ethics and state law." Amara felt the room spin. "She forged my consent?" River spread more letters across the desk, a paper trail of deception. Catherine had manipulated documents, paid off clinic staff, all to hide the truth about the surrogacy. The reality hit them both like a physical blow. Technically, legally, none of this should have happened. "Oh, God!" Amara pressed her hands to her mouth, tears spilling over. They could take them away. If anyone finds these letters. No. River stood abruptly, gathering the letters with shaking hands. His voice was steel and desperation. "I won't let that happen. I'll fix this, Amara. I'll call every lawyer, move heaven and earth if I have to. I won't let them take you, or them, away." He crossed to the fireplace, the letters clutched in his fist. Catherine's choices can't hurt them anymore. These children have suffered enough. Amara watched as he fed the letters into the flames, years of secrets turning to ash. The fire cast dancing shadows on River's face as he turned to her, his eyes fierce with determination. "We'll protect them," he promised, "whatever it takes." They stayed there, watching the flames consume the past, while upstairs 5 children slept, unaware of the storm gathering around their fragile peace. Through the open window, the night breeze carried the scent of Amara's garden, life pushing through soil, hope taking root despite the odds. In the quiet office, surrounded by the warmth of the fire and the weight of shared secrets, River and Amara stood together, united by something stronger than legal documents or blood, the fierce, protective love of parents who would do anything to keep their family whole. The morning headlines hit like thunderbolts. River's phone buzzed incessantly with notifications, while Amara stood at the kitchen window, watching reporters gather at the gate like storm clouds. Their cameras flashed through the iron bars, hungry for a glimpse of the family whose happiness now balanced on a knife's edge. Vale family scandal deepens, illegal surrogacy claims surface, blazed across the morning news. Social media exploded with speculation and judgment. "I've got security positioned around the property," River said, his voice tight as he paced the kitchen. "No one gets through without clearance." Amara watched Samuel coloring at the table, blissfully unaware of the chaos brewing. "The children can't go to school like this. They'll be mobbed." As if on cue, River's phone rang. His face darkened as he listened. "They what?" His knuckles went white around the phone. "No, tell the new life board they can't just—" He fell silent, listening. "Get our legal team on this, now." When he hung up, his eyes met Amara's. The fertility clinic's surviving board members are threatening a lawsuit. They're claiming all 5 children should be returned to state custody while the legality of the surrogacy is investigated. The crayon in Samuel's hand snapped. He looked up at them with wide eyes, and Amara realized he'd understood every word. "No one's going anywhere, sweetheart," she said quickly, moving to wrap her arms around him. "Daddy won't let that happen." But Samuel's lower lip trembled. "Promise?" Before either adult could answer, the doorbell rang. River's PR team filed in, faces grim with purpose. They commandeered the dining room, spreading papers across the polished table where the family had shared breakfast just hours before. "The optics are terrible," Sharon, the lead publicist, declared. "We need to control the narrative immediately." She turned to River. "Distance yourself from Ms. Carter. Issue a statement saying you were also deceived, that you're cooperating fully with authorities." "Absolutely not," River cut in. "Mr. Vale, be reasonable. Your wife's actions put you in an impossible position, but right now, association with the surrogate makes you look complicit." Amara felt the word like a physical blow. Surrogate. Not mother. Not partner. Just surrogate. Their names are Grace, Isaiah, Lily, Michael, and Samuel. River said, his voice deadly quiet. "And Amara is their mother." Sharon sighed. "Sentimentality won't help when the government gets involved. Speaking of which," She slid a document across the table. The Department of Family Services is sending inspectors. Tomorrow. Amara's heart dropped. She knew what government inspections meant. She'd counseled too many foster children not to know. They'd examine every corner of the house, interview each child, scrutinize every aspect of their lives. The day passed in a blur of phone calls and preparations. River barely left his office, while Amara tried to maintain normalcy for the children. But they weren't fooled. Isaiah's duffel bag migrated from beside his door to under his bed. Lily stopped eating. Grace went quiet. Terrible, absolute quiet. By evening, the stress had wound everyone tight as springs. When Michael knocked over a glass at dinner, River snapped at him sharply. The boy burst into tears, and Amara shot River a look that could have frozen fire. After putting the children to bed, they met in his office. The room felt smaller somehow, crowded with unspoken fears. "We need to be united on this," Amara said. "The children pick up on everything. If we're divided, united." River's laugh was harsh. "The whole world is watching us fall apart, and you're talking about unity? I'm talking about our children. Children who might be taken away because of lies." The words exploded from him. "You were part of this lie, Amara. You signed those papers." The moment the words left his mouth, River's face crumpled with regret. But it was too late. The accusation hung between them like poison. Amara stepped back, her face pale. "I signed papers to give life, to help a couple who couldn't have children. I never knew about Catherine's deception." She turned and walked out of the office, her steps echoing through the quiet house. River followed her to the guest wing, where she was already pulling a suitcase from the closet. "Amara, please. I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." She folded clothes with mechanical precision. "You're scared. I understand that. But I won't be your scapegoat." "That's not what I—" He reached for her arm, but she pulled away. "They need both of us, River. These children need parents who can stand together, who trust each other." She zipped the suitcase closed. "But I won't stay where love feels like blame." River stood frozen as she walked past him, down the stairs, through the foyer where family photos now hung, snapshots of joy that suddenly felt fragile as glass. At the door, she paused. "I'll be at my house in Oak Ridge. When you remember who we're really fighting for, you know where to find me." The sound of her car starting cut through the night. River stood in the doorway, watching taillights disappear down the long driveway. The warmth that had filled his house these past weeks seemed to leave with her, leaving only echoes of what they'd almost built. Inside, a floorboard creaked. River turned to find Isaiah at the top of the stairs, his ever-present duffel bag in hand. "Are we leaving too?" the boy asked, his voice carefully neutral, but his eyes betrayed his fear. River's heart broke. He climbed the stairs and pulled his son, yes, his son, into a fierce hug. "No," he whispered. "No one else is leaving, I promise." But as he held Isaiah, River stared at the open door where Amara had disappeared, knowing he'd let his fear destroy the very thing he'd been trying to protect. In pushing away the woman who'd helped him build this family, he might have just ensured its collapse. Outside, camera flashes still punctuated the darkness, documenting every moment of their family's crisis. But it was the darkness inside the house that frightened River most. The absence of Amara's laughter, her gentle wisdom, her unwavering faith that love could conquer any obstacle. He'd forgotten that faith when he needed it most. Now, standing in his hollow house with one trembling child in his arms and 4 more sleeping fitfully above, River realized that sometimes the biggest threat to happiness isn't external pressure, but the fear that makes us push away the very people we need most. The mansion felt hollow without her, like someone had drawn all the warmth from its corners, leaving only echoes where laughter used to be. River Vale stood in the kitchen, staring at a pot of pasta that had boiled over, creating a mess on his pristine stove top. He glanced at his watch. 6:45 in the evening, and dinner wasn't even close to ready. "Dad?" Grace's voice carried from the dining room. "We're hungry." "Just a few more minutes," he called back, though he wasn't sure if that was true. How had Amara made this look so easy? In the 2 weeks since she'd left, their carefully crafted routines had crumbled like sand castles in the tide. Breakfast was a rushed affair of cereal and toast. School lunches were forgotten more often than packed. Dinner. Well, dinner was whatever River could manage between conference calls and crisis meetings about their legal situation. The children felt her absence like a physical ache. Isaiah withdrew further into himself, spending hours alone in his room. Lily's nightmares returned with a vengeance, and she'd taken to sleeping in Grace's bed. Even Samuel, usually the most cheerful, had grown quiet and watchful. "The pasta's burning," Michael announced from the doorway, his nose wrinkled. River cursed under his breath and moved the pot off the heat. The noodles had turned to mush. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair, fighting the urge to order takeout for the 3rd time that week. "I miss Mom," Michael said softly, and River's heart clenched. They all called her that now, had been calling her that for weeks before she left. He'd pretended not to notice, afraid of what it meant, what it could mean. "Me too, buddy," he admitted, pulling out his phone to order pizza. Again. Across town in Oak Ridge, Amara Carter sat at her desk in the empty school counseling office, trying to focus on paperwork. The sun had set an hour ago, but she couldn't bring herself to go home to her quiet house. Every corner reminded her of what she'd left behind. A drawing caught her eye, a child's artwork of a family, stick figures holding hands. Her throat tightened. That morning, a 1st grader had come to her office, upset about his parents' divorce. "Sometimes grown-ups fight," she'd told him, "but that doesn't mean they stop loving you." The words felt hollow now, echoing her own struggles. She'd left to protect herself, yes, but what about the 5 children who'd already faced so much abandonment? Rain began to patter against her office window, matching her mood. She gathered her things slowly, dreading another evening alone with her thoughts. As she locked her office door, a movement at the end of the hallway caught her attention. There stood River Vale, soaked from the rain, his usually impeccable suit wrinkled and dark with water. He looked lost, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. "River?" Her voice echoed in the empty hallway. "What are you doing here?" He took a step forward, water dripping onto the linoleum floor. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice rough. "I'm so sorry, Amara." She clutched her bag tighter, fighting the urge to go to him. "You're drenched. How long have you been standing there?" "I don't know. An hour, maybe. I've been trying to find the right words." He ran a hand through his wet hair. "I'm not good at this, at admitting when I'm wrong, but I was wrong, Amara, so wrong." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as silence stretched between them. Finally, Amara sighed. "Let's talk in my office. You'll catch cold standing there like that." Inside her small office, River stood awkwardly while she found a spare blanket she kept for distressed students. He wrapped it around his shoulders, looking nothing like the powerful CEO who'd first summoned her to his office months ago. "The kids miss you," he said softly. "The house. It's not the same without you. I'm not the same without you." "River, no, please, let me finish." He stepped closer. "I let my fear control me. When the clinic threatened legal action, when the reporters started circling, I did what I always do. I looked for someone to blame. But you're not the enemy, Amara. You never were. You're the miracle that brought my children to me." Tears pricked at Amara's eyes. "They're my children too," she whispered. "That's what scared me most about leaving. I love them like they're my own." "They are yours." River's voice cracked. "Please come home. Not for me. I don't deserve that yet, but for them. They need their mother." Amara sank into her chair, overwhelmed. "I can't just... I know it's not that simple. I know I hurt you. But I promise you, Amara, I will spend every day making it up to you if you'll give me the chance." He knelt beside her chair. "We can face whatever comes together. The legal battles, the press, all of it. Just please, come home." She looked into his eyes, seeing not the guarded businessman, but the father who loved their children, the man who'd learned to laugh again during family dinners and bedtime stories. "I need time," she said finally, "to think, to pray about this." River nodded, standing slowly. "I understand. Just know that we're waiting for you, all of us." That night, in her quiet house, Amara knelt beside her bed like she had every night since leaving. "Lord," she whispered, "show me the way, give me a sign." Sleep came fitfully, and with it came dreams. She saw 5 small hands reaching toward her through a golden light. They weren't grasping or demanding, just reaching, trusting she would be there to hold them. A voice, warm and clear, whispered through her consciousness. Family isn't about contracts, it's about love. She woke with tears on her cheeks, just as the first rays of dawn painted her ceiling pink. Without hesitation, she packed a bag and got in her car. As she drove toward Dallas, the sunrise blazed before her like a path of light, leading her home. The morning traffic was light, giving her time to think. She thought about River's apology, about the children's faces, about the empty space in her heart that only they could fill. Legal papers and biology didn't matter. Love had made them a family long before they understood the truth of their connection. Each mile marker brought her closer to the decision she'd known in her heart all along. Sometimes love meant taking risks, meant choosing faith over fear. And maybe that's what family really was. Not a perfect arrangement, but a choice to love despite the imperfections. The Vale mansion appeared through the trees just as the sun fully cleared the horizon. As she pulled into the driveway, she saw movement behind the curtains. 5 small faces pressed against the glass, waiting for their mother to come home. The morning after Amara's return brought a different energy to the Vale mansion. Sunlight streamed through windows that had stayed shuttered during her absence, and the sound of children's laughter echoed through halls that had grown too quiet. "Mom, you have to help me practice." Grace bounced on her toes. Sheet music clutched to her chest. Her school concert was that evening, and she'd been chosen for a solo performance. Amara's heart swelled at being called Mom again. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's hear it." They gathered in the music room, where an old piano sat beneath tall windows. Grace stood straight and proud, her braids catching the morning light as she began to sing Amazing Grace. Her young voice filled the room with a clarity that brought tears to Amara's eyes. River appeared in the doorway, drawn by the music. He leaned against the frame, watching them with a soft expression that made Amara's heart skip. These quiet moments, they were what made everything worth fighting for. "That was beautiful, Grace," River said when she finished. "You'll bring down the house tonight." "The whole family's coming, right?" Grace asked, eyes bright with hope. "All my brothers and sisters?" "Wouldn't miss it for the world," Amara assured her. "We'll all be right there in the front row." Throughout the day, excitement built in the house. Lily helped Grace pick out her dress, while Isaiah, usually too cool for family activities, offered to film the performance. Even little Samuel practiced his own version of the song, though it mostly consisted of humming. As evening approached, they piled into River's SUV, the children chattering about the upcoming performance. Amara sat in the passenger seat, watching River navigate through traffic with one hand on the wheel, the other reaching occasionally to squeeze her fingers. The elementary school auditorium buzzed with activity. Parents filled the seats, programs rustled, and behind the curtain, dozens of young voices warmed up. Grace disappeared backstage with her choir group, while the rest of the family found their seats in the front row. "She's going to be amazing," River whispered to Amara as the lights dimmed. The concert began with group performances, holiday songs, and classic children's tunes. Then came the moment they'd been waiting for. Grace walked to center stage, her white dress gleaming under the spotlight. The first notes of "Amazing Grace" filled the auditorium, and Grace's voice soared clear and true. Amara felt tears rolling down her cheeks as she listened to the words that seemed to carry extra meaning tonight. "I once was lost, but now am found." River's hand found hers in the darkness. "This is what forever feels like," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. The audience sat spellbound as Grace's voice lifted to the rafters. When she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. The applause thundered, and their family leaped to their feet, cheering the loudest. After the concert, Grace ran to them, flushed with triumph. "Did you like it? Was I okay?" "You were perfect," Amara said, pulling her into a tight hug. The other children crowded around, offering their own congratulations and praise. The drive home was filled with joy, singing, laughing, reliving every moment of the performance. But as they approached the mansion's gates, River's grip on the steering wheel tightened. Red and blue lights flashed in the darkness, and several official vehicles blocked the entrance. "Daddy!" Grace's voice trembled from the back seat. "What's happening?" River parked the car, his face grave. "Stay here," he told the children, but Amara was already getting out, her heart pounding. A woman in a suit stepped forward, flanked by uniformed officers. "Mr. Vale, I'm Sarah Martinez from Child Protective Services. I have a court order for temporary custody of all 5 children." "No." Amara's voice came out as a whisper. "No, you can't. The judge has reviewed new evidence submitted by the fertility clinic." Martinez continued, her voice professionally detached. "Until the legal situation is resolved, the children will be placed in state care." River's face had gone pale. "This is ridiculous. We can appeal." "You can appeal through proper channels," Martinez said. "For now, we need to take the children." The car doors opened as the children, sensing something wrong, climbed out. Grace ran to Amara, clinging to her waist. "Mom, what's happening?" Officers moved forward, and Amara felt her world crumbling. "Please," she begged. "They just performed in their school concert. They're in their nice clothes. At least let them pack some things." "I'm sorry," Martinez said, though her eyes showed genuine regret. "The order is effective immediately." What followed was a nightmare Amara knew would haunt her forever. The children screaming, crying, reaching for their parents as officers gently but firmly led them away. Isaiah trying to fight, Samuel wailing for his mommy, Lily going silent with shock, and Grace, sweet Grace, being carried to a waiting van, her voice breaking on one last, "Mom!" Amara collapsed to her knees on the driveway, screaming their names as the vehicles pulled away. River stood frozen, watching helplessly as their family disappeared into the night. The silence that fell was deafening. Inside the mansion, the evidence of their family life seemed to mock them. Grace's sheet music still lay on the piano. Samuel's stuffed elephant sat abandoned on the couch. Lily's half-finished drawing remained on the kitchen table. Amara wandered from room to room in a daze, touching small reminders of their children. A hair ribbon here, a soccer cleat there. River followed her, his footsteps heavy, until they both ended up in the family room, where just that morning they'd all eaten breakfast together. The silence pressed in around them, thick and suffocating, Where there should have been the sound of running feet, laughter, arguments over the television remote, there was nothing. Just the hollow echo of a house that had been transformed from a home back into an empty shell. Amara sank onto the couch, clutching Samuel's elephant to her chest. River stood at the window, his shoulders rigid with tension, staring out into the darkness where their children had vanished. The quiet seemed to stretch endlessly, broken only by the sound of Amara's quiet sobs and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, counting down minutes in a house that had, in the space of one evening, lost its heart. The morning sun crept through the kitchen windows, casting long shadows across the empty breakfast table. Dishes from their celebratory pre-concert dinner still sat in the sink, a cruel reminder of how quickly joy could turn to heartbreak. Amara sat at the kitchen island, her hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee she couldn't bring herself to drink. Her eyes were red and swollen from a night spent crying. Across from her, River looked equally destroyed, his usually pristine appearance disheveled, his tie hanging loose around his neck. "I keep expecting to hear their footsteps on the stairs," Amara whispered, her voice rough. "Samuel always came down first, remember? Running like a little hurricane." River's hand trembled as he pushed his untouched coffee away. Grace would be asking for pancakes right about now. His voice cracked on their daughter's name. The silence that followed felt like a physical weight. The kitchen clock ticked loudly, marking each second without their children's laughter, their squabbles, their life-giving presence. "We need to do something," Amara said suddenly, standing up. "I can't just sit here. There has to be someone we can talk to, somewhere we can go." River nodded, already pulling out his phone. "I'll have my driver bring the car around. We'll start at the downtown courthouse." The next several days became a blur of desperate activity. They drove from courthouse to courthouse, their voices growing hoarse from pleading with clerks, judges, anyone who would listen. River's money and influence seemed to hit a wall of bureaucratic red tape at every turn. At the family court building, they waited hours just to be told they needed to file different paperwork. At the civil court, a sympathetic clerk explained that the fertility clinic's evidence had triggered an automatic review of the adoption proceedings. "But there are children," Amara insisted, her hands pressed flat against yet another counter. "Don't you understand? They need us." The clerk's eyes softened with pity. "I'm sorry, Ma'am. Everything has to go through proper channels now." By the fourth day, exhaustion had settled deep in their bones. They sat in River's car outside the last courthouse on their list, defeat heavy in the air. "I don't know what else to do," River admitted, his head resting against the steering wheel. "Every legal avenue seems blocked." Amara looked at her watch. It was nearly 6 o'clock in the evening. "The evening service at my church starts in 30 minutes, she said quietly. Would you come with me?" River lifted his head, surprise flickering across his tired face. "I haven't been to church since—" He trailed off, but Amara knew he meant since his wife's death. "I know," she said gently. "But sometimes, when we've done everything we can do, that's when we need faith the most." After a long moment, River nodded and started the car. The church was small but welcoming, its stained glass windows glowing warmly in the evening light. They slipped into a back pew just as the service began. The familiar hymns washed over them, and Amara felt tears sliding down her cheeks as the congregation sang about God's unfailing love. When it came time for private prayer, they knelt together in the soft candlelight. Amara's voice was barely above a whisper as she began to pray aloud. "Lord, thank you," she started, causing River to look at her in surprise. "Thank you for letting me love them, even if it was just for a season. Thank you for Grace's beautiful voice, for Samuel's morning hugs, for Lily's quiet wisdom, for Isaiah's protective spirit. Thank you for letting me be their mother, even for such a short time." River's shoulders began to shake beside her as she continued. "I don't understand your plan, Lord, but I trust you. Watch over our children. Keep them safe. Let them know they're loved, even when we can't be there to tell them." She felt River's hand find hers in the darkness, gripping it tightly as tears ran down his face. They stayed there long after the service ended, kneeling in the quiet church, their joined hands a silent testament to shared grief and hope. The drive home was different from their other defeated returns. Something had shifted in River. A new determination had replaced his despair. As they pulled into his driveway, he turned to Amara. "I've been fighting this wrong," he said. "I've been trying to throw money at it, trying to solve it like a business problem." "What do you mean?" "I'm calling an emergency board meeting first thing tomorrow morning," he said, his voice growing stronger. "I'm stepping down as CEO." "River, no!" Amara gasped. "The company is your life's work." He shook his head, a fierce light in his eyes. "No, those 5 children are my life's work. I've been approaching this as a businessman, but what they need, what we all need, is a father. I'm going to fight this as a father, not a CEO. But everything you've built means nothing without them," he finished firmly. "The company can run without me. Our children need their father, fully present, fully committed. No more splitting my attention, no more delegating the fight to lawyers. I'm going to get our family back, Amara. Whatever it takes." She reached across the console and squeezed his hand, feeling hope flutter in her chest for the first time since that terrible night. In the darkness of the car, surrounded by the empty silence of their home, they held on to each other and the promise of tomorrow. The house was still painfully quiet as they walked inside, but something had changed. Where before the silence had felt like an ending, now it felt like the pause before a beginning. River walked straight to his office to begin drafting his resignation letter, while Amara headed to the kitchen to make a fresh pot of coffee. They had work to do. As she waited for the coffee to brew, Amara's eyes fell on the refrigerator, still covered with the children's artwork and school papers. Her heart ached, but it was a different kind of pain now, not the hollow agony of loss, but the deep, determined ache of a mother fighting for her children. She touched Grace's latest spelling test, Samuel's crayon drawing of their family, Lily's carefully written poem about butterflies. "Hold on, my darlings," she whispered. "We're coming for you. We won't stop until you're home." The coffee maker beeped, and she poured 2 cups, carrying them to River's office. He sat at his desk, typing with intense focus, the same expression he wore when closing million-dollar deals, now directed at the letter that would change everything. She set his coffee beside him and perched on the edge of his desk, watching him work. In the soft lamplight, she could see the father he'd become, the man who would give up an empire for the chance to tuck his children into bed at night. They worked through the night, River crafting his resignation, while Amara made calls to her church's prayer group, organizing a support network. As dawn began to paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, they shared a look of quiet determination. This was just the beginning of their fight, but for the first time since the children were taken, they felt ready for battle. Not as a CEO and a counselor, but as a father and mother, armed with something stronger than money or influence, the fierce, unwavering love of parents fighting for their family. River made one last call before leaving his office behind. Sarah Chen, an award-winning investigative journalist known for exposing medical fraud, answered on the second ring. "Mr. Vale," she said, her voice sharp with interest. "I've been following your story. I need someone who isn't afraid to dig deep," River said, glancing at Amara, who sat beside him. "Someone who'll find the truth, no matter how ugly it gets. Send me everything you have. I'll start immediately." For the next 2 weeks, Sarah became a constant presence in their lives. She pored over dusty records and conducted countless interviews, her determination matching their own. Each evening, she'd arrive at the Vale mansion with new findings, spreading documents across River's dining room table. "Look at this," she said one night, pushing forward a stack of financial records. "The money trail is messy, but it's there. Your former lawyer, James Mitchell, received monthly payments from the clinic for years after it closed." Amara leaned closer, her heart pounding. "Hush money." Sarah nodded. "And that's just the beginning. I've found evidence of at least 12 illegal embryo transfers. Your case wasn't unique. They were running a systematic fraud operation." River's face darkened. "How did they hide this for so long?" "Money, threats, falsified documents." Sarah pulled out more papers. "Your late wife's signature appears on forms dated months after her death. They weren't even trying to be careful anymore." As Sarah dug deeper, more disturbing details emerged. The clinic had preyed on vulnerable women, forging consent forms and manipulating desperate couples. The scale of fraud was staggering. "We need to take this public," Sarah declared after 3 weeks of investigation. "But we need a face for the story. Someone who can make people understand what's at stake." River and Sarah both turned to Amara. She sat quietly for a moment, then straightened her shoulders. "I'll do it. Not just for our children, but for every family they've hurt." The interview was scheduled for prime time. Amara chose a simple blue dress, her hands steady as she applied her makeup. River watched from the doorway of her bathroom, worry etched on his face. "You don't have to do this," he said softly. She met his eyes in the mirror. "Yes, I do. Those children need their mother's voice." The studio lights were bright, but Amara remained calm as the cameras rolled. The interviewer, a veteran reporter named Diana Matthews, started with gentle questions about her work as a school counselor. "Tell us about the moment you first saw Grace," Diana prompted. Amara's smile was genuine. "It was like looking at my own childhood photos, but more than that, it was like my heart recognized her before my mind caught up." As she spoke about each child, her voice grew stronger. She described Isaiah's protective nature with his siblings, Lily's quiet wisdom, Samuel's infectious laugh. She talked about teaching them to bake cookies, helping with homework, kissing scraped knees. "These aren't just legal cases," she said, her eyes bright with tears but her voice steady. "These are our children. They're not numbers in a fraud investigation. They're 5 precious souls who deserve to be with their family." The nation watched as Amara shared their story, not with anger or accusation, but with dignity and unwavering love. Social media exploded with support. Bring Them Home started trending within hours. Sarah's exposé ran the next morning in a major newspaper. The evidence was damning. Years of systematic fraud, millions in illegal profits, dozens of families affected. Public outrage was immediate and intense. By noon, the Attorney General's office announced an emergency investigation. By sunset, federal agents were raiding homes and offices across Dallas. River and Amara watched the evening news together as Dr. Marcus Reynolds, the former clinic director, was led away in handcuffs. The camera caught his face, once smug with impunity, now pale with fear. "This isn't about revenge," Amara said softly. "It's about justice, for our children and for every family they've hurt." River pulled her close, his voice thick with emotion. "You've done what I never could. You made them see the truth, not through money or power, but through love." They stood together at the window, watching the sun set over Dallas. Somewhere out there, their children were waiting. But for the first time since they'd been taken, hope felt stronger than fear. Sarah called late that night with more news. The Attorney General was personally reviewing their case. Other families were coming forward with similar stories. The wall of silence was crumbling. "Your interview changed everything," Sarah told Amara. "People aren't seeing this as a legal battle anymore. They're seeing it as children being kept from their parents. The public pressure is enormous." Amara hung up the phone and found River in his old office, surrounded by the children's photos. "What happens next?" she asked. He stood and took her hands in his. "We keep fighting, together, not as CEO and surrogate, but as mother and father." The house was still too quiet, still aching with absence. But now that silence held promise instead of despair. Justice was coming. Truth was winning. And somewhere in the darkness, 5 children were dreaming of home. Public support continued to grow. Churches organized prayer vigils. Parent groups held rallies. Social media buzzed with demands for justice. Local news stations ran special reports on the clinic's fraud, featuring interviews with other affected families. Through it all, Amara's grace under pressure became a symbol of maternal strength. Her televised words echoed across the country. "Love makes a family. Not contracts, not courtrooms, love." That evening, as River and Amara sat together reviewing the latest updates from their legal team, he turned to her with wonder in his eyes. "When I was focused on power and money, we got nowhere," he said. "But you showed them the heart of what matters. Our children, our family, our love." Amara squeezed his hand, remembering the quiet church where they'd prayed together, the moment he'd chosen fatherhood over his empire. "We're stronger together," she said simply, "and soon we'll all be home." The truth was finally coming to light, not through corporate power or legal maneuvering, but through the unwavering love of parents fighting for their children. Each new revelation brought them one step closer to reunion, one step closer to making their house a home again. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps as Amara Carter smoothed her navy dress with trembling hands. The weight of what lay ahead pressed heavily on her shoulders, but her spine remained straight, her chin lifted with quiet dignity. River Vale stood beside her in a charcoal suit that seemed to hang differently on his frame now, less like corporate armor and more like a father's best effort to make a good impression. The past weeks had changed him. The sharp edges of the CEO had softened into something more human, more vulnerable. "Ready?" he asked softly, offering his arm. Amara nodded, taking a deep breath. "As I'll ever be." They climbed the courthouse steps together, passing through security and finding their way to courtroom 3. Their lawyer, Patricia Martinez, waited for them outside the heavy wooden doors, her expression carefully neutral. "Remember," Patricia said, "just speak from the heart. The judge needs to see the real people behind the paperwork." Inside, the courtroom felt both too large and too small. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, casting patterns on the polished wood. Amara's heels clicked against the floor as they made their way to their seats. The social workers sat at the opposite table, files stacked neatly before them. Judge Eleanor Matthews entered, her silver hair pulled back severely, her robes flowing as she took her seat. "In the matter of the Vale children," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed room. When Amara was called to testify, she walked to the witness stand with measured steps. After being sworn in, she sat straight-backed, hands folded in her lap. "Mrs. Carter," Patricia began gently, "please tell us about the surrogacy agreement." Amara's voice was steady as she recounted those early days. "I had lost my husband," she explained. "The medical bills were overwhelming. When I learned about surrogacy, it seemed like a way to help another family while helping myself." She described the pregnancy in detail, the morning sickness, the doctor's appointments, the joy of feeling 5 tiny lives growing within her. "I sang to them," she admitted, a soft smile touching her lips. "Every night I would sing hymns and tell them they were loved." The social workers shifted uncomfortably as Amara continued, describing how she'd been told the embryos hadn't survived. "I grieved for them," she said. "I grieved for the family I thought had lost them, never knowing they were out there, growing up without us." When asked about reuniting with the children, tears finally slipped down her cheeks. "Grace looked just like my baby pictures, and when I met each of the others, Isaiah's protective nature, Lily's gentle spirit, Samuel's laughter, I saw pieces of myself, pieces of River. They weren't just children who needed a home. They were our children, coming home at last." The prosecutor's cross-examination was sharp, focused on the illegal nature of the original surrogacy. But Amara's responses remained measured and honest. "Yes, I now know the consent forms were forged," she acknowledged. "But that doesn't change the fact that I carried these children, that I've loved them from the moment I knew they existed, that they need stability and family now more than ever." River's testimony came next. Gone was the polished corporate speaker. In his place sat a father, raw with emotion and humility. "I failed them," he admitted, his voice rough. "I was so consumed by grief over my wife's death, so buried in work, that I never questioned what I was told. I should have investigated. I should have found them sooner." He described the transformation of his home after the children arrived. "For years, that house was just a place where I slept between meetings. They made it alive again. They made it a home." His eyes met Amara's across the courtroom. "And watching Amara with them, she taught me what it means to be a parent, not just providing for them, but truly loving them, guiding them, being present for every moment." Throughout the day, character witnesses took the stand, teachers describing the children's progress, child psychologists testifying about the importance of stability, even the investigating journalist sharing what she'd uncovered about the clinic's fraud. As the sun began to set, Judge Matthews called a recess. "I'll review the evidence overnight," she announced. "We'll reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock for my decision." Outside, Amara and River found themselves facing a sea of supporters. Hundreds of people had gathered, holding handmade signs with messages like, "Let love win," and "Keep the Vale family together." Church groups sang hymns softly in the gathering dusk. Parents from the children's school handed out coffee and cookies. Rather than leave, Amara and River sat together on the courthouse steps. The stone was cold beneath them, but neither seemed to notice. Their hands found each other, fingers intertwining naturally. The crowd stayed too, maintaining a respectful distance but surrounding them with silent support. As darkness fell, someone passed out candles until the courthouse steps glowed with hundreds of tiny flames. Amara leaned slightly against River's shoulder, drawing strength from his presence. No words were needed between them now. Everything important had been said in that courtroom. Their failures, their growth, their love for 5 children who had changed everything. The city lights began to twinkle in the distance. A cool breeze carried the scent of approaching autumn. Church bells somewhere struck the hour, their deep tones rolling across the evening air. Through it all, Amara and River sat in peaceful silence, their joined hands a bridge between past and future, their hearts full of hope and faith. The community's quiet presence wrapped around them like a warm blanket, reminding them that whatever tomorrow brought, they weren't alone. Members of their church group took turns bringing them water and snacks, though neither felt much like eating. Other parents who had lost children to the clinic's fraud stopped by to squeeze their shoulders or whisper words of encouragement. As the evening deepened, Patricia emerged from the courthouse, her briefcase heavy with documents. She paused beside them, her expression softening at the sight of their linked hands. "You did well today," she said quietly. "Both of you. Now we wait and pray." Amara nodded, her thumb tracing absent patterns on River's hand. The testimony had drained her, but a deep peace had settled in her heart. She had spoken her truth, laid bare her love for these children who were both miracle and destiny. River's shoulder was solid. Against hers, his presence anchoring her to this moment. The businessman who had once seemed so unreachable was gone, replaced by someone who understood that true wealth couldn't be measured in dollars or stock prices. The crowd continued their vigil as night settled fully over the city. News vans parked at discreet distances, their cameras capturing the scene, the hundreds of candle-lit supporters, the signs waving gently in the evening breeze, and at the center of it all, two people whose love for 5 children had exposed a scandal and touched countless hearts. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But for now, surrounded by faith and community, Amara and River found strength in silence and hope in each other's presence. The morning sun streamed through the courthouse windows, painting golden rectangles across the worn wooden benches. The courtroom was packed, with every seat filled and people standing along the walls. The air felt thick with anticipation and prayers. Amara sat with perfect posture, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to hide their trembling. River beside her looked equally tense, his normally confident shoulders rigid beneath his dark suit jacket. Judge Matthews entered, and the bailiffs, "All rise," brought everyone to their feet. The judge's expression revealed nothing as she settled into her chair and adjusted her papers. "After careful consideration of all evidence and testimony presented," she began, her voice clear and measured, "I have reached my decision regarding the custody of the 5 veiled children." Amara felt River's hand find hers. She gripped it tightly, her heart thundering in her chest. The actions of the fertility clinic were not just unethical, but criminal. However, the children's welfare must be our primary concern. The judge paused, looking directly at Amara and River. "I have reviewed reports from child services, school records, and psychological evaluations. The transformation in these children since joining the Vale household is remarkable." She smiled then, the first crack in her professional demeanor. "It is therefore my decision to grant full and permanent custody of all 5 children to River Vale and Amara Carter with immediate effect." The courtroom erupted. Cheers and applause thundered off the walls. Reporters in the back row wiped tears from their eyes even as they scrambled to type on their phones. Their attorney, Patricia, was beaming, tears streaming down her face as she hugged them both. But Amara barely registered any of it. "Where are they?" she whispered, standing on tiptoe to see over the crowd. "Where are my babies?" As if in answer, the side door burst open. 5 children raced in, led by Grace, their temporary foster mother hurrying behind them with a broad smile. "Mom! Dad!" Grace's voice rang out above the chaos. She threw herself into Amara's arms, nearly knocking her over. Isaiah, trying to maintain his teenage dignity, lasted about 3 seconds before joining the "our" group hug. Lily and Samuel crashed in from opposite sides, while little Michael wriggled his way into the center of the family circle. River wrapped his long arms around all of them, his face wet with tears he didn't try to hide. The children were laughing and crying at once, creating a joyful noise that filled the high-ceilinged room. "We can go home now?" Samuel asked, his dark eyes serious. "Forever? Forever and ever?" River promised, ruffling the boy's curls. "No more separations. We're a family." As the crowd began to thin, River suddenly straightened. He kept one hand on Isaiah's shoulder but took a step back, creating a small space in their family circle. "Amara," he said, his voice carrying a new note that made her heart skip. These past months have taught me more about love than I learned in 44 years of life." The children grew quiet, watching with wide eyes as River reached into his suit pocket. Grace gasped first, grabbing Lily's hand in excitement. River sank to one knee right there in the courthouse hallway, holding up a simple but elegant diamond ring. "We built this family through grace," he said softly. "Let's live it through love. Will you marry me, Amara Carter? Will you be my wife and their mother, officially and forever?" Amara's hands flew to her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. Before she could answer, the children started chanting, their voices echoing off the marble walls. "Kiss her, Daddy! Kiss her!" She laughed through her tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes to all of it. To you, to them, to us." River slipped the ring onto her finger with slightly shaking hands, then stood and pulled her close. When their lips met, the children's cheers were joined by applause from the remaining courthouse staff and reporters who had witnessed the moment. Grace hugged herself with delight. "Now we're really, really a family," she declared. "Forever and ever and ever." Isaiah, trying to look cool but failing to hide his grin, pulled out his phone. "We need a picture," he announced. "Our first official family photo." They gathered together, all 7 of them, with the morning sun streaming behind them through the courthouse windows. Amara's ring caught the light, sending tiny rainbows dancing across their faces as they smiled for Isaiah's camera. "Thank you, Lord," Amara whispered, surrounded by the love she'd always dreamed of but never thought she'd find. "Thank you for turning our pain into purpose, our losses into love." 6 months later, the Vale estate bloomed with new life. Spring flowers dotted the once formal gardens, their bright colors matching the children's artwork that now decorated every wall. The mansion, once a monument to loneliness, had transformed into a bustling home filled with warmth and laughter. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows, casting golden light across the large farmhouse table where the family gathered for breakfast. Above them hung a wooden sign, lovingly carved by River's own hands. "Miracle Vale, where love was born twice." Isaiah, now 16, helped Samuel set the table while telling him about his latest mentoring session at the youth center. "This kid reminded me of you," he said, ruffling his younger brother's hair. "He's really good with animals, too." "Did you tell him about my chickens?" Samuel asked eagerly, his eyes bright. The backyard coop had become his pride and joy, providing fresh eggs for their family breakfasts. Grace sat at the table, her sketchbook open beside her plate. Her latest painting, a family portrait done in vibrant watercolors, held pride of place above the fireplace. "Mum, can you pass the syrup?" she asked, not looking up from her drawing. Amara, dressed in a flowing sundress, carried a towering plate of pancakes to the table. Her wedding ring caught the morning light, sending tiny rainbows dancing across the ceiling. River stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pressing a soft kiss to her cheek. "Everyone sit down," Amara called out, opening her well-worn Bible. "Breakfast and scripture time." The children settled into their seats, passing plates and pouring juice. Even Isaiah, who once rolled his eyes at family traditions, smiled as he bowed his head. Amara's voice filled the kitchen as she read from Psalm 23. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." River reached over and kissed her hand, causing the younger children to giggle. Samuel dramatically covered his eyes, while Grace sketched the moment in the margins of her book. Pancakes disappeared amid prayers and laughter. Stories of school projects and upcoming events mixed with plans for the weekend. This was their new normal, chaotic, beautiful, and whole. Amara paused, taking in the scene before her. The morning light painted everything in soft gold, highlighting River's gentle smile, Isaiah's protective stance near Samuel, Grace's artistic focus, and the pure joy radiating from all of them. Sometimes, she whispered, her voice full of wonder, God lets the world fall apart so he can show us how love puts it back together. Beyond the open windows, birds sang in the garden Samuel tended. The sound of their children's laughter echoed through the house, a symphony of love, redemption, and faith, perfectly intertwined in the home they had built together. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.